Hello and welcome to Lesson 9 in this Chess Beginner to Winner series, in which we take you from absolute chess beginner to winning tournament games and beyond. So today we'll be talking about the opposition in chess, and some beginners might not even be familiar with that term at all, but if you are, bear with me, you may know some of this, but if not, let's show the absolute beginners what opposition is. So opposition in chess is basically where if it's your turn to move, and let's say white moves here, well, now he has the opposition. Because the black king cannot make any forward progress. He can only move side to side or backwards. So if the king tries to move to the side and get around the white king can grab the opposition again by moving directly one square in front of, leaving one square in between the two. So this is called the direct opposition here. They're directly in front of each other, and neither side can make progress. The black king cannot move forward. He can only move to the side. So if the king moves here, there is also the diagonal opposition where the white king could move here with one square in between, and they're diagonally opposing each other. Now, black could move down here, and white has a decision to make. He could take the diagonal opposition or the direct opposition from the side here. But whatever he does, he uses the opposition to keep the king from making any progress. Now, why is this important in chess? Well, when there are no pawns here or no other pieces, the game would be a draw. But something that's very important is if you get down to a chess endgame where your opponent has a pawn and you do not. So with white to move here and try to win this game, let's say white tries to move forward with his king here, because if he moves the pawn, of course, black can just capture it. Well, to keep this game headed towards a draw, if we look at the evaluation here, king to c7, would be losing, and king to e7 would be losing. So black uses the opposition. He moves here, grabbing the opposition and preventing the white king from making forward progress. And so now, if the pawn moves forward, then black jumps directly in front of the pawn. And then white will have to move here to protect the pawn. Now, this is important. In order for black to maintain the opposition, he needs to move back in front of this pawn. So he moves straight back, and this is the easiest way to avoid losing in this endgame. Just move straight back. If the king moves over here, grab the opposition again. If the pawn jumps forward, just stay in front of the pawn. You could also move directly back here in front of the pawn. And if the king tries to make progress, you just jump in front of this king again, grabbing the opposition. And if the pawn tries to move forward, well, now you jump in front of the pawn, and look at this position here. So white has only one move to save his pawn, and that would be to move right here to d6. If he moves back, the pawn will be captured and it'll be a draw. But now if he moves here, it's a draw as well because the black king is stalemated. And of course, remember that you have to have a checkmate to win, not a stalemate. Even though white is ahead in material, there are no legal moves for black. So he can't move to the left or the right up here because the pawn is covering those squares, and the king now covers c7 and e7. So the king is trapped, but it's black's turn and he has no legal moves, which is a stalemate. So this is a very important maneuver to remember when you have a pawn. Now, if you're trying to promote that pawn or you're trying to block that pawn, the opposition is very important. So if we go back to the beginning here, and let's say black didn't know what he was doing, and he just, I don't know, excuse me, it's white's turn here. So let's say white makes his normal move that we played earlier when we went through this example. And then if black didn't know what he was doing, and let's say he moved over to the side here to c6. Well, now this allows white to make forward progress. And black, if he tries to maneuver back over here and get in front of the pawn, well, now white can gain the opposition and put this one square in between the two kings. So now if the king tries to step straight back like this, well, then white can just march forward and grab the opposition once again and force the king to move left or right. So it looks like, if he goes here, well, then now we could have this move. And, what does black do? If he tries to go after the pawn, well, now the pawn just marches forward, and white has control of the queening square here. So if the king moves up, the pawn moves here, and now black can't even stay close to this area because the pawn is cutting off this square. So he would have to go here, and the pawn will just march up and promote here. So maybe the king goes there, and then queen check. And with queen and king, we saw in one of the earlier lessons how easy it is to win with the king and the queen. And I could show you here shortly. So let's say black wants to stay in the center of the board to avoid being trapped. But you can use the knight square or knight move away method to press the king back to the edge of the board. So let's say, I don't know, he moves up here. Well, then you can just keep pressing forward. If he goes here, you can just do this. Knight move away wherever he goes and just slowly press him up to the edge of the board. And now he's kind of trapped. He has to pick this edge or this edge. Let's say he goes here to make it a little more complicated. You could do the knight move away again, and he would be forced to the edge here, and you could try this. Remember, once they get on the edge, to trap them by controlling the next rank or file, and then your king can swoop in here and deliver a mate. All right, but we've kind of got off subject here, so back to the beginning. Once again, remember to use the opposition, and this is a endgame I would definitely recommend practicing on a computer, or even better, take turns with a friend and play through this endgame. And I'll go over it one more time. One other thing to note here. The game can be much more difficult or easy, depending whose side it is, if it's a rook pawn on either side. Now, if you have a pawn in the center here, and it's white's turn and he moves forward, we saw that black must take the opposition to stop white's progress. So I'll just go through that real quick. Here, they can move here. You just protect your pawn. He backs up. You try to make forward progress, but he grabs the opposition by jumping one square in front of you, or leaving one square in between both of you. And then the pawn moves forward, attacking, trying to make progress. And now, if he steps straight back, let's say the king just does this. Well, now you can come forward, staying in front of the pawn. Maybe the king tries to go this way, and you just step straight back, because that allows you, once he jumps up here, to grab the opposition once again. And now, what does white do? If he backs up, you just jump in front of the pawn. If he presses forward, you just stay in front of the pawn, and then we would have a stalemate position here. Now, what I was saying about rook pawns, there are crazy things that can happen with these rook pawns. So let me set up a new position. Let's say you have a rook pawn here, and white is here, the king is here. Now, if it's white's turn here, and he tries to take the opposition, if he was in the center of the board, that would be an advantage. But here, since it's a rook pawn, he can just stay here in front of this pawn and just stay in the corner. And what can white do? If he grabs the opposition, the king just moves up. If he goes here, he tries this, but there's no room on the other side of the board to move over and take control of the queening square. So if the pawn just moves up and he goes here, well, now we see that white has to move out of the way, and he just moves back and forth. And as the pawn moves up, he just jumps here, and if the king moves away, black can attack the pawn. But if he goes here, it's a stalemate. So another thing to watch out for. So just to show how things are different in the center of the board, if we see the pawn's on the fourth rank, the king's beside it, it's white's turn to move, and there are two squares in between. So I'll move these over. So even if we just move over one to here and then here, and it's white's turn to move. Well, now white would be winning if he grabs the opposition. So let's say he tries to stay in front of the pawn. Well, white can just take the opposition here again. And now wherever the king moves, so let's say if the king moves straight back, you just take the opposition again. But eventually he'll have to move to the side. So if he does that, now you could move up here and take control of the queening square. So what is black to do? He has to move out. But now the pawn will be protected and escorted up by the king. And black cannot even move forward. So if he goes there, the pawn just starts moving up. And he cannot even go here because of the pawn. So that's an example of how the opposition can be used to win. But it's a little trickier with these rook pawns. So if we go back to the beginning position, I'll show you one more rook pawn position. Let's see here. So here, and let's say the king is over here, and I don't know, this guy is here. Or we'll do this. We'll show the opposition from the side here. So black has the opposition, and if we load this up, it's white's turn. So if white tries to march his pawn forward, and now white has the opposition, what should black do? Well, black can just move up here or down here even, but if he moves up here, if the pawn tries to keep pushing forward, well, now black could take the opposition, and now the king is forced to move up. Black takes the opposition again. And if the pawn moves forward, well, now white is trapped in here. What should black do? Black goes here, and so now white is out of this trapped area. The only thing available is to move here, but this allows black to take the opposition. And then once again, if the pawn moves up, king to h8, and white either has to move away and lose the pawn or move here and it's a stalemate. So anyway, some interesting opposition positions there in the end game, and the opposition can be very important. So I would recommend just practice those on a computer or play through them on a board and see how they work. Even better, play a friend and take turns from both sides, trying to win and trying to defend, and just see how the different positions play out. All right, well, if you enjoyed this video and you haven't, like and subscribe if you will, and support the channel. Also, feel free to leave comments, suggestions. You can put in requests for chess videos that I'll try and do in the future. And thank you all for watching. Have a super chess day.